You are back to the Speaking and Communicating podcast. I am your host, Roberta. If you're looking to improve your communication skills, both professionally and personally, this is the podcast you should be listening to. Today, I am joined by the best-selling author of The Power to Speak Naked. He is a former stunt master. We're going to have to find out more about that. And he is a keynote speaker. So he's here to share with us a lot of tips that we're going to have to master if we want to have speaking careers. And he's also a father, a husband, which is going to give us a little bit about his family, whatever he feels comfortable with. And before I mess up his introduction any further, please help me welcome Tyler. Hi.
Hi, Roberta. It's a joy and a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for being here. I'm excited about our conversation. I was very intrigued. First of all, let's talk about the stunt master thing, because I think it's not a lot of time that on this podcast we have people who've been in stuff. I want to know, did you work with like Schwarzenegger? Which movie? Tom Cruise? I want to know.
So here's the funny thing. I actually have worked with the governor, but not in film and television. I actually have been on stage with him at a Power of Success event where he was the keynote presenter and I was working the event. So I actually have worked with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but not in film and television, which I think is quite funny.
You're not a Terminator.
Yeah, but I have met him, and you don't call him the Terminator. You are to address him as a governor.
Okay.
Or Arnold Schwarzenegger, but not any of the other things. He's very specific about it. And I suppose, when you've won an election, you have the right to ask that you be addressed with your proper title. But he's a very, very interesting and very charismatic man. I really enjoyed the time that I got to meet him, and I actually may be speaking with him again later this year. Well, I'm just waiting to hear back from the event coordinator. So that's going to be really cool.
Oh, that's really interesting. How did you get into that, being a stunt master?
So I got into stunts, and to be clear, I'm an actor who does stunts, not a stunt performer who acts. So I started in theater when I was 6 years old, and very, very early on. And I was blessed to grow up in and around the arts. I went to a fine arts high school. Before I even graduated, I had moved out to Vancouver, which is the Canadian version of Hollywood, and was performing in film and television at that point. So I got into film and television in my later teens, and then pursued that. I did that until my mid 20s. And after 20 years retired. So that was because, that's what you do after a 20-year career. But in my later teens and early 20s, I knew a lot of really cool stunt professionals. My first agent when I was in Vancouver represented a lot of stunt performers. And so I got to do a working around a lot of the stunt guys. And every once in a while, if I was the right fit, they would ask me if I would come and do some stunt work. So I got to work with some of the top professionals in the business, and some just amazing people who allowed me the freedom to do some really cool things. But because I know some really good stuntmen, I would never consider myself a stuntman. I'm a performer who does stunts, but I got to do cool ones like jumping out of a 6-story window. I got to do a sword fight with one of the top sword masters of his generation before he passed away, Richard Faraci, and I've got to do some really cool things.
So when you do that job, that means you are not afraid to die. Because when we see Tom Cruise doing it, he's not really doing it, it's Tyler doing it. So what, your insurances, everything is on point if that's the job you choose to go for?
Well, here's the funny thing. Tom Cruise actually is Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise does his stunts, and he's very, very adamant about it. And no, me doing my stunts, I am terrified to die, which is one of the reasons why I do stunts, because stunt work is actually the safest job that I've ever had. And I'm a trained safety professional now. And so I know what is and is not safe and help other people discover what is and is not safe. And safety is paramount when you're doing stunts, because nobody likes it when Hollywood production is splashed over the news about how they've killed somebody. So the stunt work is really interesting in that it is the purest form of substitution. When you're looking at it from safety, they call it the hierarchy of controls. And the thing that you want to do above anything else is eliminate any hazards or dangers. And if you can't eliminate them, then you want to substitute in something less dangerous. And then and from there, you have engineering controls, administrative controls, and then personal protective equipment. And what's interesting about stunt work is it's a combination of all four of those control measures, where you're substituting in somebody who is trained more than what the typical actor would be to come and do that particular stunt. And you have multiple stunt professionals who specialize in various things. Like I specialized in high falls. There are other stunt professionals who specialize in
getting out of burning cars or something.
Getting out. Well, so burns is one, and then cars is another. And if you have to combine burning cars, that's a whole other specialty. And yeah, gunplay, sword fights, martial arts, all of those things, they have their own specific and unique specialities. So it's a really interesting and fascinating thing to get into.
Right. And that's why I asked how dangerous it is, because I'm thinking, were you married when you started this job? And
No.
was your wife concerned and said, we got kids, please don't go out there and die, and I get a phone call?
No, I married late and had children even later. It's funny because my wife has never known me as Tyler the actor. When me and my wife, when we met, I was actually working for an airline, and we met in an airport. And at that point, I had retired from acting and was going back to school. So she knew me as this airline guy, entrepreneur, and engineer type. She never really knew my acting side, and it isn't until recently that I've actually gotten back into film and television that she's gotten to see some of the stuff that I've done. We've gotten my daughter into film and television as well, so it's been interesting for my wife to see that side in full, because she's heard about it. Like all of my family and friends know me as the actor because I've been doing it for so long, but it's actually a part of my life that I had steered away from. Yeah.
So as exciting as this sounds, the next question is, how did you move from this to boring public speaking?
Well, so first of all, I don't think public speaking is boring. I think it is fun. I think it is energizing.
Some of the people I coach, they might think so, but carry on, sorry.
Well, and that's the funny thing. I think if you have that vision of it, I think it's more a reflection of you speaking than it is of what public speaking is itself, and by you, I mean the clients who think that, your audience who's listening right now. The thing about public speaking is it can be boring, but it's because we know boring presenters, and you can be incredibly fascinating and compelling. And public speaking is something that we've been doing for eons to communicate with each other. And if it truly was boring, the message would never have landed. But like for hundreds of years, like you had town criers, you had philosophers, you had like everybody at some point needed to communicate, and it was long before the literacy rates are what they are. So like we needed people who could public speak, because that's how we got our news, because we didn't have television or radio.
Sure. Even in my culture back in the day, at the village, they'll have the king, but he'll have his right-hand man doing the speech and gathering the villagers together, and they hear what he has to say. That was public speaking. That was public speaking. And it's one of the most purest forms of communication that humanity has. So it doesn't have to be boring. It certainly doesn't have to be mind-numbing. And I got into it because it just seemed the natural progression. You go from acting, and then I went back to school and got an engineering discipline. And then I started my own business, and that
first business unfortunately collapsed, but in trying to marry what all of my talents are, I discovered that, through my gift of being able to speak on stage comfortably, I was able to communicate ideas and teach and educate. My father was an educator. My grandmother was an educator. So teaching is in my blood, and then I have this performance side of me that I've been passionately chasing since 6. So I'm almost 4 decades into performing on some form of stage. And now this is just that perfect opportunity for me to use all of my talents in a way that is meaningful. Because one of the things about being on film and television and stage is, it's fluff, right? It's entertainment. It's
We
a
enjoy.
distraction. And I mean, people enjoy it, but it's brief and it's fleeting. Where if I can teach somebody something, right? Like, you want to feed a man, you teach him to fish, you don't give him a fish, right? And I really want to let people evolve and change and have a little bit of impact that way. So one of the things that I love the most about speaking is you can have impact on beyond the one-on-one. You can do it one on many. And if you have a really good message and a really good lesson, you can have tremendous impact in the world.
Right. You are so not the avatar of engineer that I'm used to dealing with. I started working with engineers in the 90s, and the socially awkward, he's brilliant but quiet. And
Yeah.
therefore, when they are promoted to leadership positions, suddenly the guy's like, I'm not supposed to talk to people. I just want to program. I just want to do my CAD drawings. How did your personality, of all things, decide to study engineering? Because you are not
I,
the avatar for it.
so it's been really weird because, again, I have this real arts centered part of my personality, and I love performance. But one of the gifts that I got being in stage and film and television very early on in my life was that I got, when you're doing that kind of work, particularly when you're young, there's a whole bunch of rules around how long you can work and what needs to be in place when you work. And one of the things is they need to provide time for your education. And so they oftentimes I would have like a private tutor or an educator who was working with me while I was away from school and doing some of these projects. So I got unbelievably good one-on-one attention. Plus, the school district that I grew up in was one of the top ranked school districts in the country. And so I was, just from, pure happenstance of geography, gifted one of the best educations I could have ever gotten publicly. And so I had some of the top educators in the country who were invested in my education. Plus I got private tutoring. So I was always very scholastic. Plus, being the son of an educator, especially when my father passed away when I was only 6 years old when my father passed away. So, that really had an impact on, what I did with my life and some of the drive that I had behind what I was doing. And I didn't ever want to be a disappointment to his legacy or his memory. And so I really strove scholastically. So I have this hybrid of, particularly in the maths and sciences. I love math.
My
I
favorite
love
subject.
science.
I tutor.
Yeah, and I love seeing, I love the purity of math, right?
The
There's
logic.
no yeah, there's no ambiguity with it. And those are the things that I really I like. I'm somebody who enjoys metrics. Like, even in my speaking, I like to know the impact, but I like to be able to measure it. That's one of the reasons why you and I were introduced on Podmatch. And one of the reasons I love Podmatch so much over other services that will introduce guests to hosts is that Podmatch actually has metrics. I know how many social followers I've gotten, how many downloads I've gotten, how many episodes I've been on, what my ranking is, how many 5-star reviews I've received. All of those things are
All the
important to me because
analytics.
I love the analytics. I love the science behind it. And so yeah, it's weird because I am an aberration in an engineering type. I don't fit in with engineers, but I also don't fit in with the purely artistic types either because they're very, woo. I'm very like, no,
Like
tell me, give me the,
utopia.
yeah, give me the numbers. I need to know. It will work itself out. Yes, but how will it work itself out? Come up with a plan.
That's the
So
math.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I often find myself walking a tightrope between almost two realms. But one of the gifts that I've gotten is this ability to do this. So I understand the engineering mind. And one of the things that I found and why I've been so successful is my initial course that ended up becoming the book was developed from me teaching exactly what you described, somebody who has been promoted into a supervisory or managerial position, who just wants to do their job and all of a sudden has this additional responsibility of having to lead a team or speak to people or promote a product or whatever that they don't feel comfortable doing because that's not what they do. They do this thing and they do it really well. They program or they design or they're they draft. This is it. This is what I do. Don't make me do this other thing. And their resistance to this other thing is hindering them in so many ways. And I wanted to, I would rise through various organizations very rapidly, not because I was the smartest, because I wasn't, not because
The thing on this podcast, it's not the smartest that get promoted.
No, it's the people who appear to be the smartest because they're the most articulate and most dynamic in the way that they speak. And I wanted to share this gift with some of the very, very brilliant people around me. And so I started teaching this as just kind of like a side gig, and it grew and it grew and it grew. And more and more I'd have executives who'd reach out to me. They'd be like, well, what did you do? This team over here, they're excelling now. The presentation was the best presentation I ever saw. And I'm like, oh, well, it's because, we've been working one-on-one. And, oh, will you work with me? And the next thing I knew, I was working with executives and C-suites. And now I found my really happy sweet spot. And that's working with female entrepreneurs who have a social component to their business and or charity directors themselves who are having a hard time getting their message out about why they do their thing because they've gotten into this passion project and it's expanded exponentially because of the passion and the drive behind it, because they're doing good, but they don't know how to go beyond that. They don't know how to tell people about it because now they're thrust into this leadership position and they're like, I just want to do my job. I don't want to have to speak about it. And it's the not speaking about it that's hindering them.
Presentations and people management, etc.
Yeah.
Is that how the book came about?
It's exactly how the book came about. I had put together this training presentation, which initially we called Basic Instructional Technique, BIT, because it was designed for engineers and the engineers love their acronym.
Good one. Yes, BIT.
Yeah. So it was BIT. And then when they realized it was Public Speaking 101, they panicked. But BIT, Basic Instructional Technique. And it was a quick introduction into some very simple ways of getting your message across, being able to lead presentations, being able to give very basic speeches and without getting bogged down with memorization and all the rest of that, because I strictly abhor memorization. And this is coming from an actor who used to have to memorize scripts. I think the best presentations are structured.
They need to have structure. When I used to teach in South Korea, I said, don't memorize, you're going to forget.
Yeah. And so I had done this initial course. And again, being an actor, I always film everything. And as I started to be asked to do more keynote presentations, to do more workshops, to do breakout sessions at these various conferences that I would speak at, more and more people would ask if I had a book. And I was like, no. And it was starting to limit and hinder me because a lot of these organizations would want books so that they could then sell it or promote it or say, you do this thing. So I ended up taking my training course and all the video that we had from it, grabbing the audio from the video, transcribing that audio, and then compiling it into the book. So the book is basically my, 2-day seminar in written form with a little bit more context to it, so that because the people won't be able to do the exercises that they would be doing in the course. So we've created links on QR codes so that they can go to the website, download the material, and work on it themselves.
Right. When I first saw your book title, which by the way, listeners, it's called The Power to Speak Naked, I thought to myself, when you approached me, I said one of the podcasts, I said, I'm not sure if I want to speak to the guy, because here's my problem. I don't want this thing of advising people to picture their audience speak naked. I'm like, if this is his theme, if this is what he wants to talk about, I don't want to talk to him, because I really detest that piece of advice that, oh, if you want to overcome your fear of public speaking, you must picture. I said, Tyler, please tell me that's not your book.
Nope, not the book. As you know, it's actually the opposite of. I too think that the worst advice you could give somebody is to picture your audience naked. Your audience is a sacred gift, for one thing. So you're doing a disservice to your sacred gift by diminishing them. Further, it's a waste of brain power. Like, it's an unnecessary mental exercise when you have so many other things that you need to be focusing on, particularly your audience. So no, I do not promote that. And as you and I had discussed prior to the recording, I would rather give somebody the power to speak naked than to ever picture their audience naked. And by that, I mean figuratively. I believe that everybody has a story to tell, and that you have no idea the impact that your story could have until you tell it. You don't know who needs to hear that. And I want to empower people to feel so confident in their message that it doesn't matter what they're wearing, that they could go wearing the emperor's new clothes and nobody would notice, because the words that they were using and how they use those words would be so compelling and so engaging and so captivating that the audience wouldn't even notice, and that they would have such confidence in themselves and their message and what they were doing that they wouldn't care. Because on the surface, I want them to be able to do that. But the subtext to that is, we don't need all the fluff. I want people to be able to give a raw, naked presentation. So they don't need the PowerPoint. They don't need props. They don't need audio visual. They don't need lighting. They need an audience, and the audience needs them. And that's all they need. And an audience is 2 or more people.
Right.
One person is a conversation, 2 people is an audience. And I want people to be so in the zone that they don't care, that they don't need it, that they can just give that presentation from the heart and have people, truly engaged with them. And then the subtext of it all, the root of the title, is that I strongly believe that the thing we're afraid to say is what our ideal audience needs to hear. And so when I say the power to speak naked, it doesn't mean literally taking your clothes off, but it means figuratively stripping yourself down to the raw, naked truth, and having the bravery and the courage to share it in the way that it needs to be shared with the audience who needs to hear it. And that's really what the nexus of the book is about.
Right. Being vulnerable, because that's what's going to connect you with your audience.
And you with your audience, and your audience with you. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Let's bust the first myth that everybody has a story. Most people believe they don't, or they don't believe their lives are interesting enough for them to have a story. What would you say to that?
I say everybody has a story, and I can prove to your audience in under 2 minutes that they have at least 5. What I want your audience to do right now, only do it if you are not driving in a vehicle. If you're listening to speaking and communicating while you're driving, it'll be hard to do this, but you can do it as a mental exercise. Just pay attention to the road. But when you're home, if you get a chance, re-listen to this episode and grab a pen and paper. Take your age, however old you are, and round to the nearest 5, either up or down. For me, I'm 42. I'm about to turn 43. So as I'm 42 right now, I would round down to 40.
Okay, so I'm 45.
Yeah, next month, I would round up to 45. But you're going to round to the nearest 5. Now you're going to take that number and divide by 5, right? Because I want simple math here. So if I'm 40, divide by 5, I'm going to get 8. If I'm 45, divide by 5, I'm going to get 9. And whatever your number is, those are going to be the time periods that we're going to divide your life into. So 5 even time periods of X number of years. And now what I want you to do is for each one of those time periods, for me, the first time period being 0 to 8, I want you to think really quickly, and don't overthink this. You have less than 10 seconds. If I told you your first time period, whatever it is, 0 to 6, 0 to 8, 0 to 10, 0 to 15, what is the first memory that comes to mind when you think of that time period? Whatever it is. And this could be a sound, this could be a smell, it could be a color, it could be a vivid memory, or it could be a hazy feeling. Whatever it is, when you think of that first time period, what is the first memory that pops to your mind? And I want you to write it down. And then I want you to do that for each subsequent time period. And you should have 5 distinct memories that come to you. And we all have them. We all have them. Sometimes you have more than one. Sometimes it's a struggle to find the one in the one time period, but another time period has more. Write down what comes to mind instantly. 10 seconds, 15 seconds tops. If you have to think more than that, you're overthinking it. In doing that exercise, I guarantee you at least came up with one thing. And that one thing is your story. The 5 things are your stories. The key to this exercise is not the quick, simple math of discovering that we actually have the story. The real exercise and the work comes after that in the exploration of why. Why does that memory stand out to you? Why is it so significant? Why is it important? Why is it when you think back to that above any other memory that you have, that's the one that floats to the surface. That's the one that sits on top. And when you explore that why, that will start to inform why you do the things that you do, why these things are important to you. And from that, you can start to explore the lessons. Who were you prior to that event? Who were you during that event? Who were you after that event? What did you need to know? What did you know? What did you learn? What did you need to learn? What could somebody else learn from that for you? And in exploring that, that becomes your story that you then tell to other people to inform them about what they could learn from what you learned. And it all comes from those memories that bubble to the top. So I promise you, even if you have the most boringest life, you're talking to an engineer.
Who was a stuntman.
But that's exactly it, right? We all have these things. I know I was just at my 25th high school reunion, and there was a gentleman there that was always off during high school, and a lot of guys picked on him. And later, we didn't know at the time, but now we do know because it's a lot more aware. He was on the spectrum, and I can't remember if he's Asperger's or autism or both, because they're related. But he was always quirky, and his thing was he would play with a yo-yo, and everybody would bug him for using this yo-yo because it's high school, right? Who plays with a yo-yo? Well, one of the girls remembered this about him, and he'd come back to the reunion, and 25 years separating high school him to adult him, and one of the girls said, "Hey, do you still play with yo-yos?" And he goes, "Yes," because it's his coping mechanisms. It's how he deals with stressful situations. It's how he deals with life. And so he pulls out this titanium custom-made yo-yo, and he starts doing these tricks. Well, he has spent the better part of 2.5 decades mastering this thing. And he was spinning it and flipping it around, and everybody was mesmerized by this. They're watching him do it, and he's like flinging it back and forth and up and down and catching behind his back because it's his zone, it's his genius. Now, he doesn't really do anything outside of that. I think he still lives at home, and I think he works as a grocery clerk, bagging groceries.
Mm.
But he has this thing that he does with the yo-yo, and it's fascinating. And if that's his only one thing, that's his
Wow.
only one talent, it's still amazing to see. And so he can talk about, flipping yo-yos and walking the dog and doing the cats in the cradle and all the amazing things that he does that I don't even know what they are, but he explains it and he knows, and he loves it, and he talks about it, and he talks about it with a passion and enthusiasm that just bleeds out. And you're like, hey, that's cool. And he entertained us like it was a Cirque du Soleil thing for like a good 20 minutes. We watched him spin
Wow.
this yo-yo around. So it anybody,
That's his
anybody,
zone. That's his home.
yeah,
And so anybody can find that in their lives, whatever makes
anybody
you.
can.
Mm, mm, wow. So everybody has a story. Just this exercise, I'm
Everybody
thinking
has
to
a story.
myself, maybe I should start journaling and write all these 9 different timeline experiences, because
Well, and
a
that's
lot
exactly
came to my
it.
mind.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The more that comes to your mind, the more you can explore it, because it's not just one story. And that's the thing. Les Brown says it better than I ever could. Never tell a story without a point, and you never make a point without a story. We illustrate our world how we see it through story. It's
Mm-hmm.
how we communicate. It's how we understand each other. And it's through the power of story that we gain sympathy and empathy, because they say never judge a person until you've walked a mile in their shoes. Well, I can't walk in your shoes, Roberta. I'm sure I would look fantastic in them, because
Long as you can
I
walk in
do.
heels.
I can and do look good in heels, but it's still, literally quite hard for me to do. We're physically distanced, and I don't know that you have my shoe size. I have dainty feet, so I might, but you know, the fact of the matter is, though, it's hard for me to actually experience what you experience. Right? We are diversely different in almost every way conceivable.
Mm-hmm.
But if you tell me a story about how you experience the world, I can see the world through your eyes, through your description. And when you tell me how your world looks to you, I gain understanding. And it's in that gaining that understanding that we gain connection. As I said, we gain our empathy and our sympathy. We get understanding. And it's through the power of story that we were able to do this. It's an old sales adage that stats tell, but stories sell. Well, if
Mm.
I need to be sold on your worldview, I need to see it through your world. So I need to hear your story. And it's the story that really engages us.
Hence, they usually say people don't buy the product, they're buying you.
That's right. And beyond that, the feeling that you give them, right? They
That's what
don't
I
remember the
wanted.
words
I
that you
wanted
say.
to say. I think when you were talking about the timelines, a lot of the stuff that came to my mind immediately, it was because there was a strong feeling associated with the experience at the time. Is that why we always remember those particular? Because I don't remember the whole 9 years, of course, but why we remember those particular experiences, because there was a strong feeling associated with it.
Almost always a strong emotional charge. I mean, that's really what ingrains memories, right? Like even when I was doing my acting and I was trying to memorize lines, if I just was looking at lines and just reading them and reciting them,
Mm-hmm.
you don't remember them. But if you put an emotional charge behind it and you understand how you need to feel through it, now all of a sudden there's context to the words, and the words are easier to recall and remember at that point. And exactly that. Your strongest memories are the ones that have some form of an emotional charge,
Mm-hmm.
positive or negative, but they have there's a reason that they stick, because the way that the brain wires itself, um, the stronger the feeling associated with it, the more synapses are firing, the more connections are being made, so that your neurons are firing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And now all of a sudden you remember all of these things. They become deep rooted and seated inside of your brain. And then the other thing is too, because there's that emotional charge, when you tell that story, you're able to relive that moment. And you, if told well, you can bring your audience on that journey. And that's really all storytelling is taking your audience from point A to point B and giving them an experience.
as they walk through it with you.
Mhm.
All right. So since you've agreed that your book is not about picturing your audience naked, what is it? What are some of the highlights in the book that if people, obviously they're going to buy it after listening to this episode, what are they going to find in there that's going to help them become better speakers?
To be honest, it's a lot of what to me seems very obvious and simple advice on mostly overcoming those nerves, right? So stage fright's a real thing. The fear of public speaking is not. And I try to dispel that myth right up front because everybody will say, "Oh, I'm terrified of public speaking." And I'm like, "Really? Have you ever ordered food in a restaurant?" And they'll be like, "Yes." I'm like, "Did you know your server?" They'd be like, "No." And I'm like, "Okay, so let me get this straight. I just want to know. You went to a public place, spoke to somebody you didn't know, and got delivered to your table a thing that you asked for. Is that correct?" And they'd be like, "Yes." I'm like, "Okay, so you spoke in a public place. That's public speaking. To somebody you didn't know, that's speaking to a stranger. You asked for food and it came, so you got what you asked for." So this notion that we're afraid to speak in public, that we're afraid to speak to strangers, or that we're afraid to ask for what we want in the world is completely null and void if you've ever been to a restaurant and had food come to your table.
Don't we always ask for directions when we're lost? And we ask for
Yeah, we all. That's right. Well, no, because I'm a man, so I'm genetically pre-programmed to not feel the need to ask for directions. But my wife, being smarter than me, will make me do it. So
bravo to her.
at some point, I'll be asking a stranger for directions. But we do speak in public quite regularly. Stage fright, however, is a real thing, and it usually stems from this fear of public judgment. We're not afraid to speak in public. We're afraid that when the attention is on us, that we will be negatively perceived. And so a lot of what the book goes through is those techniques to understand and believe in our core that the audience is on our side because they are. We are the expert because we are. Because if we weren't, we wouldn't have the platform.
Right.
We don't ask second best to come and present. Even if you're being voluntold to give last quarter's sales statistics at the next boardroom meeting, you are asked because you're the best choice from your boss. And if they could ask anybody else, they would have. And so you are being chosen because you are the expert. And now your job is to just deliver. And one of the other techniques that I talk about in the book is the fact that you don't have to talk the whole time. You can have a conversation with your audience. In fact, it's better to have a conversation with your audience. They've done studies on engagement where if you're just giving a monologue, as I am now, lovely diatribe, Tyler, your audience engagement is down 78%. And if you have a dialogue with that audience, you go up to 92% engagement. And that's a significant increase just by having them provide input into the talk. So as an expert, given a platform, your job is to guide the conversation, not to dictate the conversation. So you don't have to talk the whole time. You can have other people chime in, give ideas. You as the expert get to either agree or disagree or guide it and say, "No, that's a very good point. Have you considered this?" Or have them support your point saying, "Yes, that's, and if you look over here, this is where you will see that supported." That is those are the really good and true presentations. So I talk about, secrets to engagement and re-engagement of your audience. If the prevention is better than a cure. So we show you how to just not lose your audience.
Right.
But if you have noticed that they started to drift, how to bring them back. I talk a lot about pre-talk routines and what I do for my pre-talk routine and how to develop one so that very much like a high performance athlete, you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. You're gearing your mind and body to understand that, hey, it's time to take the stage, so that your body wants to take the stage, so that you're in the right mindset to do that. So a lot of the book is around mindset and breathing, to be really, really honest, and how that into giving a very good and powerful presentation.
I believe Tony Robbins does the same thing before every seminar, talk, everything. He did, yeah.
He has. And not only that, in order to support his pre-talk routine, his rider is like 3 pages long of all the things that he needs if he's doing an event outside of an event that he, like under the Robbins Research International. If
Right.
he's going and speaking, like if he's a paid keynote presenter, he gives his rider out, like there are so many things that he asks of any event so that he can be at his peak and optimal performance, so that he has the right mindset to deliver. Because I mean, he's a presence. I mean, not only is he physically gigantic, but he is,
The energy.
emotionally, and the
Mm.
energy, like you can't get around him and not like he's got a contact high to him, because even just me thinking about the times that I've been around him energizes me. Like you can't help but think Tony Robbins' presence, and all of a sudden you're woo woo.
He's literally an
Yes,
electromagnetic field.
he really is. Yeah.
Right. And therefore, when it comes to so one, you have to prime yourself, because of prime, prepare
Mhm.
yourself to be able to speak, and then engage your audience. And now that we've established that everybody has a story, and hopefully you'll do that exercise, which I'm going to continue to do. Okay, so one last thing that people need to remember if they want to get into speaking. Is there
What's the
anything
one?
else?
So yes,
Mm.
you will. I have been on stage now almost 4 decades, and I have never given a perfect performance, ever. Perfection is a fallacy, particularly in public speaking. But I have given some really good ones. And one of the things where everybody's like, well, how do I get more confidence? Well, confidence comes through competence. And competence has a legal definition: adequately qualified, suitably trained, with sufficient experience to perform the task with minimal or no supervision. You're adequately qualified because you have a story. You have a story to tell. So you have the qualifications necessary. Suitably trained, well, that's a matter of reaching out to somebody like Roberta or myself, who have been doing this for a while and who you connect with, right? Who you resonate with, somebody who you intrinsically trust to guide you on this journey. And, you can get the training. And there's, hundreds, if not thousands of places where you can find public speaking training and getting it. But the third component there, sufficient experience to perform the task with minimal or no supervision. There are opportunities to speak everywhere. The first time you do it, you may not feel comfortable. The second time, you may not feel comfortable. 10 times in, you may not feel comfortable. But eventually, over time, it becomes easier and easier and easier until you look back and go, how is it that I was afraid to do that? I want you to think back to either your first kiss or the first time you ever drove a car. How terrified were you just before you did it?
I used
You
to
know?
stop every time there was a oncoming truck, and my driving instructor
Right.
said, Roberta, why do you think he wants to hit you? Get over.
Yeah. You're terrified. You're terrified. You don't know what to do, right? And which pedal's which, and you have to think so hard about every little thing. Did I turn on the blinker? Did I not turn the blinker? Am I turning? Where is traffic? Where are the pedestrians? What's going on? But now you can just get in your car. You don't even think about buckling up anymore. It just becomes automatic. You get in, you buckle, you turn on the car, you look over your shoulder, and you pull into traffic, and off you go to your destination. Half the time you get there and you don't even remember what you did to get there, because
We
it's
don't
so
remember
automatic,
driving at all. No.
right? And that's how you really master public speaking. So it becomes that commute to the office in your car. You don't even think about it anymore. And I promise you, there are endless opportunities, because again, 77% of North Americans claim to have this anxiety around public speaking, which means 3/4 of us would prefer not to do it. And the people who are getting these leadership positions are the people who are raising their hand and saying, I will. You have no idea who needs to hear your story. You have no idea how different your life could be if you just raise your hand and be one of those people willing to take on that presentation, willing to come on a podcast and share your story, willing to create your own stages and tell people about what's going on. You have a gift somewhere inside of you. You have a passion, and you don't know who else wants to learn that passion until you start talking about it and start teaching it. And so the opportunity to speak is endless. That's why I actually created my Facebook group, Endless Stages, because I believe that the opportunities are abundant and limitless out there.
Mhm.
And the more that you look and seek these opportunities, the more they will come to you. And that will give you the ability to really practice and hone your messaging, hone your craft, learn the confidence, get the confidence through the competence, and get the competence through the practice of doing it over and over and over again. And that's how you'll become an incredibly powerful speaker. So, to your original point that started this easily 10-minute dialogue, if you want to, the first step you need to take is to start speaking,
It's like
right?
swimming. You're not going to learn it from a book, from reading a book
No,
only, which, by the way,
no.
please buy Tyler's book. But you're not just going to learn by reading about it theoretically. It's something you just have to do, and that's how you're going to get better at it.
If I want to get six-pack abs, I can't do it by watching the exercise video from my couch.
Or
I have
watching
to
the
get
governor.
up. Yeah, that's right. We're watching the governor do it. I need to actually get up and do some crunches. And the same with the public speaking. You want to get better at it, you got to be bad at it first. And trust me, I've been bad at it multiple times.
But you still made an impact despite the times that you thought you were better. You weren't good
Yep.
at it. Mm.
Well, and it's every opportunity is a learning opportunity, and I learn from my failures just as much as my successes, and I learn from my successes just as much as I learn from my failures. And they are all part of my growth process. And
Right.
I'll never stop growing, so I'll never stop learning. And hopefully I never stop speaking.
You better not. No. We need to hear more people who will inspire the rest of the population to go and just take a stab at it. Tyler, this has been such a wonderful conversation. I enjoyed it immensely. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me on, Roberta. It was a pleasure.
And before you go, please tell us where to find you on your socials. You've already mentioned your Facebook group, which most of us are going to join.
Well, I can tell you that all of my stuff is located in a very simple way. It's all on my website. You can get to all my socials. You can get to all my speaking engagements. You can get the book there. You can join Endless Stages there. Everything is on my website, and I'll tell everybody how to get there. But before I do, they're already on your platform. And if they're listening to Speaking and Communicating and they're getting value out of what you bring to them each time, Roberta, every time they download and they listen to an episode, they're doing it for a reason. And if they haven't done so, I would ask that they take a moment and hit pause on whatever device they're listening to this and give you a 5-star review. Give the thumbs up, give the like, get it, the whatever, because that's how you're going to get more guests who can provide more value to your listeners who are downloading this right now. So the least you can do, because you're already on this platform, is to hit pause, give it a 5-star review. And if you're willing to do that, as a thank you from me on behalf of Roberta, it would be my pleasure to invite you over to my website, which is SeanTylerFoley.com, and it's spelled the proper Irish way, SeanTylerFoley.com. If you come over to SeanTylerFoley.com, you will find all things Tyler there. You'll get right at the top of the page is the link to join Endless Stages. Please come through the link. Don't just look it up on Facebook, because if you look it up on Facebook and join, you won't get all the free stuff. But if you join through the website, as my gift to you for giving a 5-star review to Roberta,
Yes,
I will give you a free PDF download of The Power to Speak Naked, so that you can have a copy to look for without having to buy the book. And then you'll know what it's like. And then if you want to buy the hard copy book because you want to like write in the margins and stuff, you'll be able to do that. We'll also give you access to my free access to my Drop the Mic Speakers program, which is an online self-paced video series. And as a member of Drop the Mic and Endless Stages, every Tuesday at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, I come live for 20 minutes to talk about public speaking and give inside tips and tricks on how to be a better speaker, where to find stages, how to find those platforms, where to find those platforms. All of these things I talk about every Tuesday for 20 minutes at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, but only to the private members within the group. So come on over to SeanTylerFoley.com, it'd be my gift to you, but only if you are a person of integrity and you have given Roberta a 5-star review, because you're listening to Speaking and Communicating right now. And if you are, there's a reason. We'd love to know what it is. So don't just put the 5 stars and walk away. Actually let Roberta know what it is about her show that you enjoy so that she can tailor the content to best suit you. And if you will do that, it'll be my gift to you to get all those freebies and more if you come over to SeanTylerFoley.com.
Thank you, Sean Tyler Foley, for that. And everybody's listening is going to give a 5-star review because we all want those benefits.
That's right.
And let me just test to see how Irish you are. How do you pronounce Eoghan?
Egon?
Owen. See, I'm more
Owen?
Irish than you are.
You
I
are.
saw that in a movie.
I was trying to picture it visually. I was like, EJ, and all I could think of is Ghostbusters because it was filmed up here. So
I saw that in a movie because the girl was an American and she was in Ireland, and the guy's t-shirt is written his name at the back and it's Eoghan, and she says, "Excuse me, Eoghan?" So it's Owen.
yeah, I have a Siobhan, and it if you were to phonetically pronounce it, it looks like Seoban.
Siobhan.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. So you have Irish roots.
I do. It's the dark hair and the blue eyes that give it away.
Right. Thank you, Tyler. This has been awesome.
Thank you, Roberta.